podcast. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And folks, we got a really interesting show. The last show that we talked about, we went on with opportunity zones. We're going to continue the topic. I'm going to take it from a different perspective, though. So before we do that, let's bring in QOZ Marketplace's very own Vicki Hutchmala. Vicki, how you doing over there?
Outstanding, Ron. Always outstanding. And I'm excited because today we've got a different approach to opportunity zones. We're going to talk to a developer and see what he's learned, what he likes, and what his challenges are. So can't wait to start.
Yeah, we're going to take this to a full 180 from the last podcast that we did. And speaking of the last podcast, we're going to reintroduce one of our guests from the last show. We really appreciate him coming in, and we're having him on again today. So let's bring in Brett Siglin. Brett's from Jennings Strouss. Brett, how you doing today? You out there?
Doing great, Ron. Yes. Hi, Vicki. Thanks for having me on your show again. Good. Real good.
Oh, I'll tell you. I really liked the last podcast that we did with you, and like I said, we're going 180 on this one, and that's one of my pet peeves, by the way. People say they're going 360. You hear people say, I'm going 360. Well, that means you're staying at the same spot. But this is going to take it from a different perspective, because now we're going to talk about opportunity zones from really a developer point of view versus an investor point of view. And for that, let's bring in Dennis Hoth. Dennis is the CEO of TransEquity Development. Dennis, how are you over there today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Great. And Dennis, you're out on the West Coast in Arizona as well. Is that right?
Yes, I'm based out of Scottsdale, and have been down here almost 7 years, and originally from the Midwest up in Omaha, Nebraska, and just enjoying the warm weather right now.
Yeah, you could be golf buddies with Brett, right?
There you go.
But anyway, listen, Dennis, the last show that we did, we were talking about the trends and opportunity zones and what's going on in the marketplace. You're a developer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into development, and maybe how you kind of hooked up with this whole opportunity zones concept?
Sure. Appreciate being on the show, really do, and thank both of you for taking the time here today. And a little bit of my background. I've been at this for 39 years. That's all I've ever done is commercial real estate development and brokerage. I went to the University of Nebraska. I majored in business with a specialization in real estate. I've always loved it. My father worked in the real estate business and really kind of got me going in it. My father-in-law was the president of a savings and loan, and I started out in the loan business and appraisal business, and quickly moved from there, starting my own company in the real estate syndication business, where I would go out and raise funds through limited partnerships with investors to syndicate equity to purchase and develop real estate, mostly multifamily, office, retail, so forth. Then we came into a little bump in the road called the 1986 Tax Act. Now remember, this is a long time ago. You guys were probably not even born then. But
this is a true fact.
Yeah, it was a very big deal, and it caused a massive depression in the commercial real estate business. So the RTC came out of that, and I survived. I got through it. And so from that, really ended up going into strictly the development business. So I began developing shopping centers with a particular grocery chain out of the Midwest, and would build their 75,000-foot store, and then associated with it would build several, retail pad outlets, banks, fast foods, and then also the associated retail next to the grocery store. I did that throughout the Midwest, did many projects. Really, really enjoyed that business a lot. Evolved from that into a lot of office development. Again, continued on with multifamily. Got into a large mixed-use project, about 137-acre project, again in the Midwest, and brought in Cabela's and Costco and a couple of high-rise hotels, and did a convention center with the city and municipalities. I really enjoy all aspects of development, from land development all the way up to mixed use. And so I actually still have 32 of those 137 acres, which I'm developing into an office park right now. I did a 550,000-foot retail power center in Iowa with a joint venture partner, Kimco, out of New York. A great partner, and it ended up to be an outstanding project for us. We've sold that subsequently, and that was really probably my last Midwest project, and then moved to the Scottsdale area. I had done development work down in Phoenix prior to my moving. I did an industrial project down here several years ago, so I knew the market well. I had a partner down here that's in the tax credit business, and he wanted me to start working with him on doing low-income housing tax credits. And I was fascinated by it. It's a very difficult process to learn, and we ended up doing several projects in the tax credit arena and working with tax-exempt bond financing. And so I just finished doing an assisted living development, so I've gotten into senior housing, which I'm excited about, and did a project in Avondale, which is a suburb of Phoenix, a beautiful 164-bed, 125,000 square foot project that had independent living, assisted living, memory care, and we actually used tax credits, believe it or not, on that project. And it's stunning. It's a beautiful project. We're very excited about it. It's the future, I think, of senior housing. So we're hoping to do several more of those. And then currently I bought 7 projects up in Colorado, multifamily projects, and I'm rehabbing them right now, again using tax credits. Ironically, to bring us to the reason I'm in the opportunity zone business is 4 out of the 7 are in opportunity zones, and the legislation came together back in the last quarter of 17, and it designated certain areas that were considered zones by the particular state that would be most beneficial for development. And in my tax credit business, I used several zones already, like qualified census tracts, QCTs. Another area is called the difficult development areas, DDAs. And so I'm used to, on my several computer screens, having properties for sale in these particular zones, and I'm always analyzing the markets, trying to understand what the needs and uses are. And so I was used to looking in those zones. And Brett, who's on with us today, is my attorney. Brilliant, by the way, and he's put together a lot of projects for me, and if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have gotten through them, in all honesty. But the bottom line is, Brett called me. He said, Dennis, this is an area as a developer. It's right down your alley. You should be in this. I started to explore it. I agreed with him, and kind of the rest is history. I mean, I got together with a partner of mine who is has some strengths that I don't have. I have some strengths he doesn't have. So we're working together to get some opportunity zone projects moving. So sorry it was long-winded, but there it is.
Well, listen, it only took you 39 years to do all that, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
But I got a question on your opportunity zone. When you bought those properties in the opportunity zones area, you didn't know at the time that they were opportunity zones, did you?
Well, we actually we did, not initially, but right after acquisition, we knew that they were in them, and we had already done. See, in tax credits, you bring in investors who buy the tax credits from you as a developer. That's how you create your equity. And so our particular investor is huge bank, 6th largest bank in the country. We tried to actually craft language in our partnership agreement that would allow us to at least contemplate the use of opportunity zone, ability to use the opportunity zone within our partnership. They just didn't have their arms around it. It was so new and so early, they just rejected that. So unfortunately, even though I'm in the zone, I'm not actively haven't created a fund to take advantage of that. But I just thought it was ironic that I was already in it. And so that's on that one.
I'm intrigued with the assisted care facilities there. That's a real growing market for sure. Everybody's getting older and they need places to live, and I know that there's a lot of them popping up here in Vegas. I'm wondering, how do you determine what you're going to build on a particular piece of land that you're looking at, for example?
So there's right there is the expertise of being a developer. So if you're good at it, you basically have a vision. You go to a site, you analyze obviously what's there today and what you envision that to be in 20 years. Because we're not building these things for 5 years, 10 years. I mean, they're going to be there for 70 years. And so development is a pretty specialized area, and it takes a lot of people. I'm kind of like the quarterback, but you got to have outstanding expertise with your attorneys. I mean, they're vital, your accountants, so on. So in that whole process, I go in, I have a vision of what I think this neighborhood is going to be in 10, 20 years. And if it's an urban situation and it's in transition, you usually start to see where the transition is and how it's moving. And you have to be good at it. And also, there's a lot of things in demographics. There's a lot of things in numbers that you can glean as to who are your residents, in particular, like with senior living. I mean, what's the age of your population? But senior housing is very interesting, very different business. By the way, it's about 50% real estate and about 50% operational. So you have to have a very good operator in senior living to make that work. But the key component is a lot of times senior living is driven by the younger families trying to place their parents close to them versus going into the neighborhoods where the parents are living today and doing a project next to them. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And each product type, whether it be a retail strip center, an office building, an industrial building, senior housing or multi-housing, all have all kinds of different demographic components to it that you look at and try and decide in that particular opportunity zone, will it work?
So do you work very closely with the municipalities or local government officials in deciding what to do on a certain project?
Yeah, it's really the beginnings of it are fairly quiet, meaning, it's in front of a computer screen, it's analyzing what's on the market, it's going in as a developer really single-handedly, determining the particular site that's involved. And then once you've decided you have a vision for what you think is going to work within that municipality, the sooner you get to the government officials, the better. And also, as an experienced developer, the sooner you get, if there's single family abutting any portion of whatever development you're going to have, the sooner you get to those neighbors, the absolute better it's going to be. Because, there's so much opposition sometimes to certain types of product types. You need to ferret that out quickly so you don't waste time on certain sites that can't be rezoned or properly put together. And of course, the cities that have these opportunity zones, at least in the Arizona markets and Colorado, are very excited about them. They want to see projects come in there. I have not had a negative meeting with a city that I can recall in any opportunity zone situation that I'm looking at.
Well, they're all competing with each other, and so, the one with the best incentives is the one that wins. Nevada has a lot of incentives locally and statewide to make the process easier, to make the permitting and the zoning and the planning and all of that easier to get in and get out to start the project as quickly as possible. That makes a difference.
It does, and as a developer, our ears perk up quickly when we're met in the initial meeting, in a very receptive manner. They talk about the fast tracking process. I was just in a meeting in an urban situation in Colorado about a couple of weeks ago, and the city officials just bent over backwards to accommodate us as we're looking at projects in their market. So you can tell right away a city that wants you there and one who doesn't.
Do they ever convince you that maybe what your vision is, do they help you adjust it, or do they usually go with what your vision is?
No, they are, cities are opinionated, and, there's politics involved, there's constituency involved in those politics, and there's also, some tremendous leadership in a lot of these city municipalities that are out touring throughout the country. There's some very good planning people that are out there getting some vision from other markets as well. So they're very opinionated, and that does not mean that if they give you a vision and you come back. I'm going to speak. I won't want to name the opportunity zone, but there's a great municipality here in Phoenix that I've worked with. I'll just say it, it's Tempe, and they're just an outstanding group, and they have a vision for what they want. But as a developer, I can also sit down with them and say, look at the marketplace isn't going to allow this type of development to work. Here's why. So. There's a give and take in all this, but yes, they are opinionated. I haven't met one that wasn't.
Do you do any projects? Do you have any pending or future projects that are in the rural areas?
Yes. So the 7 projects I mentioned in Colorado are all rural projects. So I'm not just in an urban setting or even suburban settings. I think there's a huge need. To develop and redevelop, meaning buy, rehab, housing stock, affordable housing in particular in rural United States. And tremendous demand. Most developers steer away from it. A lot of it has to do with economies of scale. Developers work about as hard to do a 24-unit multifamily project as you do for a 150-unit multifamily project. So, they stay away from some of the smaller things. So there's obviously has to be some incentives to make a developer move to the rural areas, and there are. And, me as being a rural developer, has to have found those incentives, and I have. They always don't work, but there's definitely a push to try and get particularly affordable housing out into the rural markets.
So is that what you concentrate on, multifamily residences and that, or is there a demand for the ancillary businesses to support the people moving in to the residences?
Yeah, it's both. So the good thing about me in my development practice is I've developed land, office, retail, multifamily, senior housing, done tax credits, done tax exempt financing. So in my toolbox, I've got a lot of experience with different types of product, and depending on the opportunity zone, it will you have to realize that 80% of the opportunity zones, in my eyes, are very difficult to invest in. They just don't make economic sense. So what you're doing is you're really paring down certain zones into an area that, for me as a developer and investor, I'm going to only even look in those particular zones. So whether it be to me, probably the top things in opportunity zones to do. I know my partner loves industrial. I like industrial as well. I think that's a real good area to be focused in. I enjoy multifamily. I think there's a tremendous need for multifamily. So I think those two product types in itself will be the number 1 and 2 types of investments and opportunity zones.
Oh, that's interesting. Because if you don't, whatever your project, it's kind of a symbiotic situation. You need the people to support the project. If you do a project that's business oriented or industrial oriented, then you need to have the people, and the people want to live close to their jobs, so they kind of support each other.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating because development is all based. When I was talking about the vision or how populations work and infill, it all starts with where people live. Everything.
Right.
So you'll see Phoenix, for example, sprawling had a huge urban sprawl situation for many, many years and continues to have it. And you're just seeing, miles of single-family homes being built first, even multifamily being built without ancillary, retail centers or grocery stores or so on. So, what happens then is those people that buy in those outer fringes are getting really good deals on the land. The developer's getting cheaper land. They're getting cheaper homes. They're willing to drive further. But then in the next 5 years, here comes the retail to support it. And then from there springs out the office, industrial, and then probably lastly is senior housing.
Right.
So it all follows residential. Everything follows it.
Well, and here in Vegas, there's a lot of development here in Vegas, and what's interesting is in certain large development areas, they build the homes or the multifamily situations, but then within that area, they build the shopping centers, the grocery stores, the banks, everything that development needs. So if you live in this development, you don't have to drive 10 miles to go to the grocery store because they forgot to put the stores, the shops, the banks, and everything you need. So it's kind of a unique idea that each major development kind of supports itself and the residents that live in there. Let me ask you about tribal. Do you do tribal work?
I have tried to do tribal work. There's a couple of projects that I was engaged in several different times, and I did not end up doing those projects. But I do know a little bit about the tribal work and what's going on there.
It's a completely different ball game. Tribal land, even compared to regular rural land, tribal land comes under its own different criteria than other municipalities.
It's a sovereign nation.
Exactly.
So, you are dealing, even though when I drive home on the 101 loop here, I'm driving over a separate sovereign nation, not the United States.
Right.
And people around here, you don't think about it, but the tribal land, they cannot sell you the ground. It's not legal to do that. They have to lease you the ground. And then there's all kinds of legal issues on the court system. Brett can speak to this, but as a developer, as an investor in tribal ground, you have to be very, very astutely aware of the legal proceedings on projects to develop in there. Now, Phoenix, is in Scottsdale has some tremendous tribal development. It's just outstanding, and but it's cumbersome and isn't easy. You gotta usually there's a master land lease from a developer, and then as a smaller developer comes in to buy a piece of that master, then you're doing a sub-land lease. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's interesting because, some of this ground is in fantastic locations. Others are not so good.
And Vicki, we could probably do a whole separate podcast on that topic alone. We've got another client that's actually developing on that area that Dennis is speaking to right off the 101. It's very unique opportunity in an opportunity zone on tribal land.
Well, and I think that's fascinating because people don't realize tribal land is an economic opportunity and opportunity zones are located within it. But as Dennis was saying, you're dealing with a whole different ball of wax because the criteria, the rules, and everything are so different. But I think that would be a fascinating topic.
It certainly would. And to Dennis's point earlier, a lot of the other incentives have maps that overlie the opportunity zone. So it's interesting, that he discovered we'd done this deal in Colorado, the rural deal. It was on a 6-site scattered site deal, and they were in qualified census tracts, but then it turns out most of them were also in opportunity zones, and you don't necessarily have that overlap, but it's an interesting dichotomy that opens the door to utilizing other incentives like low-income credits or new market tax credits. There's also property tax exemptions and abatements, and
plus, it's a whole different cultural situation as well. So, what might work in the city that's 10 miles away isn't going to work on the tribal land where the various tribes, one from another, are different from each other. So you have that whole other component, and it just would be very interesting, I think.
You're right.
Yeah, and I want to get back to something that Dennis said before about being the quarterback of this entire process. You're the quarterback. You develop you see a piece of property that you like. What are the steps basically in terms of your team? I mean, you go to Brett as a lawyer. Then you have your accountant or you have your broker. How do all these people work together? Maybe you have a land surveyor or you have a marketing group or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of moving places in a development process. So I'm wondering, how do you manage all that?
Well, it's not easy, and that's why no. This business is not an easy business. I will just clue you in on that. And it can be very difficult at times. It's awfully rewarding, but it can be very difficult as well. So basically, experience is the key. And looking at a particular project, you want to get on board with you the right partners. And I call them all partners. I don't care if they own a part of it or they don't. They're my partner. So my law firm is my partner. My CPA is my partner. If I have an equity partner, that's somebody putting extra cash into the deal. Even down to my surveyor who surveys the site, my environmental engineer, very critical that you have somebody with great experience in environmental and can look at sites and determine whether there's any environmental issues. And then you get into entitlements and zoning. You first find a piece of property, you put it under contract, you call your attorney. The attorney sets up your purchase agreement. You have the property under contract, then you got to go through a process called due diligence. And that's just, as a developer, you pull all your team members, your partners together. You say, I need you to do the land survey. I need you to do the environmental survey. I've got to have a market study or feasibility study done, and I've got some great guys that can put that together. You have to compile all these things during your due diligence period to determine whether you want to go forward with this project. Just because you put it under contract doesn't mean you do it.
And your partners need to be people that you trust, that you can rely on, that you have confidence in. All of the partners working together and all of their networking to make a project be successful. Without that, I don't understand how you would be able to even go forward.
Well, and I left out, two of probably the most important components. That is the architect and the contractor. So let's say you get into the beginnings of due diligence and your market study comes back and it says, great, your senior housing project will do super on this site. Now I'm all excited. So now I got to get my architect, doing the site layout, and then at the same time coordinate, and I use a design build process, so coordinating the architecture with the contractor to determine the financial feasibility. And to be honest with you, and I'm sure this question is probably going to come up, but if it isn't, I'm going to bring it up. It's the construction costs today that are dictating issues in making these projects work. So we're in a very, very competitive subcontractor market right now in most major areas, and the pricing of building new product is very, very difficult right now, and that's what's making some of these projects not work.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's supply and demand. So here we had a major recession, and I would call it a depression, in the Vegas and Phoenix markets, 10 years ago, and it was terrible. Well, all these subcontractors couldn't live, so they went elsewhere. They left the market. And then, slowly but surely our economy started to, churn up again, and we had such a lack of development, such a lack of construction that there's a huge pent-up demand for, everything from, multifamily, office, retail, all of it. And it all hit at once. And it with the interest rates being low, which has been a key to our economy, by the way, the interest rates being low, it's allowed developers to readily finance projects, which means I need subcontractors. I got to have, laborers to pour concrete. I've got to have folks to, take care of, all the other building components associated with it, and all the trades had left. So now the trades that are here, are reaping the benefit. And they're able, because of the supply and demand, they're able to, bid these projects much higher than in a normalized market they would be. And it's making projects difficult to get completed.
Are you seeing an influx of people coming because the work is there, or is it stabilized?
No, I think this is very market specific, by the way. And, you can look at Denver, for instance. There was no greater commercial development market in the country than Denver for many years, and still is. But it's slowed a bit, just a tiny bit. I'm not talking about much, just a little bit. So you're seeing potentially at least some neutralization of costs, meaning that a bid that was rising 6% a year is maybe down to 2% or 1% a year in particular trades. So each market is totally different, and the sequence and the time of when you bid is critical to, let's just say you had 10 multifamily projects all bidding at the same time in the same area of the city. You're bidding up from, you're only going to have a certain segment of subs that have the ability to build that. So those prices are going to go way up. So a lot of it's timing. There's obviously some good fortune involved and so on, but it's very market specific. I'm in the middle of looking at a project now. We're right in that situation. So we're very hopeful we're going to be able to get this bid properly, but it is a concern.
Well, and that's what happened here in Vegas, too. Vegas was booming. There was a time when 5,000 people or more moved into Vegas every month, and there was a lot of work between the hotels and the construction to support all the new people moving. But then the economic downturn happened, and it stopped, and everything went into bankruptcy and foreclosure, and now it's starting to build itself up again.
Yeah, and
kind of cyclical, I think.
Yeah, it brings me to another point. So, opportunity zones, why invest in them as a developer? Most developers are builders. They develop a property, they build it, they stabilize it, they sell it, and they take their profits and they go do it again. And again and again. That's what a lot of very successful developers have done and continue to do. I'm a little bit different in that fact is that because of my experience in tax credits, the tax credit compliance period is 15 years. And so when I go into these projects, I have a 15-year window already in my mind that I'm going to be, a developer that's invested in this project for a long term. So in the opportunity zone business, as a sponsor of a opportunity zone fund, what's unique is you have the developer who's developing the project in lockstep and a part of being the sponsor of the fund together, and that developer, in particular my development projects, I will be there in year 10, 11, 15 in these projects. So it's important to know that, we're talking about recessions. We're talking about different cycles in the market. We're going to have another one. People don't like to talk about it, but it's coming. It's going to be there. So, that's why I really like the long-term aspects of this, because I want to build a project that's viable not for 2 or 3 years, but for 40 years. I want it to be properly located, the right unit configuration, that somebody in 2050 will look at this project and go, this is really a neat project. We may have to rehab it, but it's really a great spot. So the vision is 10 years just to get the tax benefits, but it could even be longer. It depends on the market. If you're in the middle of a recession in year 10, that's probably not the time to sell your project. So it may be longer, maybe 15 years that you hold it. So I think opportunity zone investment takes that long-term investor mentality, and it's a perfect combination for somebody that's got the excess gain in their portfolio. They want to diversify, and they want to go with a developer that is in it for the long haul.
Yeah, if you could find the long-term stability in a developer, then you've got a winner on that. With these opportunity zones, that's a major focus for sure on that. One other question for you, Dennis. When you've been in this business for a long time doing development, at this point, how do you find new projects? Do brokers bring them to you, or do you just do your own scouting, or how do you find these properties?
Well, I'm a broker myself, so I have access to all the different brokerage services out there that have property listings. So I naturally use all those to look for projects. I also, being in this brokerage business, I have many contacts in different markets of people who know that I'm looking. They'll call me, and then a lot of times, you may be in an area, and this doesn't always happen, but has happened several times to me, is you may be going to an area and you're specifically looking at a piece of ground that's listed for sale. Well, you look at it and you go, I'm not quite sold on the exact location. You drive down the street and there's a vacant piece of ground sitting there. There's no sign on it. Well, we have the search and the data capabilities to find out that owner. I pick up the phone. I call them direct. Are you interested in selling? Some owners hadn't even thought about it, So that's how I find them, is through brokers. There's some incredibly talented brokers in the Phoenix market, Denver markets, and they've got great product. And otherwise, you can find them on your own. It happens.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people who own opportunity zone properties, and they don't even know that it's an opportunity zone land piece. So it's kind of interesting right now. You're looking at a whole new industry, basically. So people like yourselves who are developers, and it really is a major plus when you find somebody who knows what they're doing and can put up a project that makes sense for the long term. So thank you for that. And again, we're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but it was a really good interview. You gave some great information to our audience. I really appreciate you coming on the show for us today. That was great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I could go on for a lot longer. So I'm sorry I probably took up too much time, but it's great. It's great. Yeah, and same thing with Brett. Brett is a godsend here. This guy knows everybody. I love it. Yeah. So Brett, thank you again for taking time for being on the show as well. Vicki, do you have any last questions or thoughts that you may want to ask Dennis or Brett?
Well, I just want to say that the whole purpose of our podcast that Ron and I do is to educate people and to give them information that they haven't heard from everybody else. A lot of times you talk about opportunity zones and you get the same information, and we really love doing podcasts with folks like Brett and Dennis because they bring a whole different point of view. They give more information and allow people to think outside of the box and maybe actually say, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to call Dennis because he knows what he's talking about. I love it.
Yep.
There you go.
And speaking of calling Dennis, how does somebody get a hold of you if they're interested in what they heard about on today's podcast? Is there a website, phone number, email? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so the website is www.TransEquity, TRANS, Equity, EQUITY, development all spelled out, .com. And phone number is 480-447-4920. And again, it's Dennis Hoth.
Yep, and if you're out there, you need a developer, you got to talk to Dennis. And before we go, Brett, why don't you give out your contact information, even though you did it on the last podcast? Maybe how do people get a hold of you if they need a great lawyer?
Oh, sure thing. Thanks, Ryan. Best way to reach me is phone is 602-262-5842, and my email is bsiglin@jsslaw.com.
Excellent. Well, another great podcast. Again, thank you both so much. Thank you, Vicki, for co-hosting this with me as well. If you're out there listening, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. If you go to that website, you scroll down the homepage, you'll see all our syndication sources, and you just pick the one you like best so you never miss another episode. And if you want to be a guest today, like Brett and Dennis were, there's a guest tab on the top of the website. You fill that out. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for everything you do for us. And we'll be back to you next week with another Mappable USA podcast episode. Have a great week, everyone.